Did you expect your English to be better by now? Did you think that you were going to have a vast range of vocabulary ready to use at any time? Did you think you were going to feel more confident by now in English, having all of these natural and fluent conversations? Perhaps you've been learning for years, for decades, and you keep on asking yourself, why? Why am I not there yet? Well, maybe you are. And you just, perhaps the parameters of your expectations, of what you see of progress, just needs adjusting a little bit. So we're going to discuss today this idea of expectation versus reality. Hello there everyone, and welcome back to the GSL-English podcast. My name is Gideon, and this is a podcast for all learners of English to practice and improve in a relaxed and natural way. I hope you're doing well. I hope you've had a good week wherever you are in the world. I hope it's been productive, and I hope you've had some nice weather. I know that's a random thing to say, but you know, us British, we love the weather, we love to talk about it, and this week has been absolutely glorious. The sun's been out, I've been driving around with the windows down and the music blasting, and it's just given a new lease of life to everyone here in the southeast of England. So long may it continue. I hope we get some more of this lovely weather. But apart from that, it's been a pretty average week. It's been, nothing dramatic has happened, which I think is sometimes a good thing. I like dramatic things because it gives me an interesting update to give you on the podcast. But if I'm being totally honest with you, it's been a pretty mundane week. It's been pretty normal, no drama, just going through the motions, which I can't complain with. So if you are new here and you're wondering what you have stumbled across, my name is Gideon. As I said, I am an English teacher from London, and I create these natural and authentic podcasts for you to practice and listen to real British English. We talk about random topics. We look at vocabulary. We look at expressions. It's never scripted word for word, so I have ideas of what we're going to talk about, but I try and present the English language to you in as natural way as possible. And I do encourage, if you can, just to relax and unwind with me. This isn't all about studying perfection and cramming as much as we can into the time that we have. I just want you to chill out and just enjoy some British English with me. Hopefully you come away with some new vocabulary, but also you can just practice listening to just English in its most natural form. So that's the idea. Grab a cup of tea if you can. Get comfortable. I always encourage that if it's possible. Grab a cup of coffee, whatever you want. I'm not particular. My only request is if you're going to make a cup of tea, you do it in the correct order. Long-term viewers and listeners are going to know this. It's got to be tea bag first, then water, then milk. That's my only stipulation. If you're going to enjoy this podcast with a cup of tea, you've got to do it in the right order. I feel very strongly about that. If you're going for coffee, whatever. If you're going for something a little bit stronger, whatever. Perhaps you're having lunch. I don't know. I know quite a few people listen to this whilst they're having their breakfast in the morning. What's your breakfast of choice? I recently got into overnight oats, and I absolutely love them. My wife very kindly makes them for me every night. Overnight oats, they're amazing. They fill me up. I'm not going to go into the details of the recipe because I realise that's quite boring. But yeah, that's my breakfast of choice at the moment. So the reason I'm saying all that is basically give me a subscribe. If you're listening or watching on YouTube, give us a follow on Spotify. There's new episodes every Sunday at 10 o'clock. So there you go. Now, expectations versus reality. I want to just share at the beginning here a couple of stories with you of when in my life reality has not aligned with my expectations. I'll give you one example. My wife and I were fortunate enough last January to book a holiday, and we were going to go to Cape Verde, which I've heard is a beautiful island. So we booked a 10-day holiday there, and really just with the idea of relaxing by the pool, dipping our toes in the sea, just chilling out, unwinding, reading some books. That was the idea. That was our expectation. We're going to eat loads of food, have a swim, be in the sun, and it was going to be glorious. And we upgraded to a nicer room. So we thought, if we're going to really treat ourselves, we deserve it. So our expectations were high. But slowly throughout the week of our holiday, our expectations were simply not met. The room wasn't very nice. The hotel was absolutely massive. The staff were not very friendly. The weather was rubbish. Unfortunately, both my wife and I got sick. And we just didn't really have a great time. Reality did not meet our expectations. It didn't live up to what we had expected. And it really threw us off. Of course, it's hard-earned, hard-saved money. We spent a long time saving for that holiday. We had these expectations and they were not met. The holiday did not meet our expectations. Reality had a completely different idea. And it's not always easy to deal with. I understand that that's as far as the things going on in the world. That's not a big problem at all. I'm just using it as an example of what we're talking about. When our expectations don't meet reality, it's not always easy, is it? It's not always easy to deal with. And mentally, it can send us on a little bit of a negative spiral. I'll give you another example, more of a personal one. This podcast. As you guys know, if you're regular viewers or listeners, I'm very open with this podcast. And my expectations as to where I would be at this point were higher. And that came from, I think, about a year ago, having a short period of large growth. So I had that large growth. Then I worked out in my head, well, if this continues in a year's time, I'm going to have this many subscribers. I'm going to have this many views every video. And it's going to be amazing. Those expectations weren't met. And if you're not careful, when reality doesn't meet expectations, it can really start a negative train of thought. But what can we do in that situation, particularly with our English? How can we work through our expectations not meeting reality? Because let's be honest, it's going to happen all the time. It's going to happen all the time. Reality has other plans. So if that's the case, does that mean that we should just always expect the worst and then be pleased when things actually work out? Or should we still set ourselves high expectations? Where's the balance? What should we do? Well, let's discuss it a little bit. Let's dive into what an expectation actually is. An expectation is an idea in your mind about something that's going to happen. So something that we expect, it is how we think it's going to plan out, how we think it's going to happen. It can be, how we think it's going to make us feel. And usually it's positive. It's an idyllic or ideal version of events. For example, with that holiday I was talking about, imagined it going smoothly, not getting sick, having glorious weather, the food being amazing. And that was our expectations. But let's be honest, real life is rarely perfect. Very often our expectations are not quite met. Reality is unpredictable. It's messy. And it's sometimes just disappointing. And when what happens doesn't match what we expected, it makes us feel frustrated. It makes us feel let down. And it can just affect the way that we view things. So why is there such a large gap sometimes? Why is there such a gap between expectation and reality? Take learning English, for example. Of course, that's what we're talking about on this podcast. Many learners expect to become fluent quickly and confidently. They expect that, let's say in a year's time, my English is going to be great. I'm going to do this course. I'm going to listen to podcasts every day. I'm going to watch YouTube. I'm going to take lessons. But what happens? We set those expectations, but reality is always there. Progress takes time. You realize your strengths and weaknesses. For example, you might understand grammar, but you struggle to speak or follow fast conversations. Or you might be able to follow, but you can't speak with correct grammar. It's frustrating. But this is a normal part of the learning process. It is reality. But that doesn't make it easy to deal with. That doesn't make it easy to comprehend, particularly when we're putting in all of the time. We're putting in all of the effort. You see all these videos on YouTube where it says this is the one thing you need to do to make sure you can understand every conversation and get involved. And they set these such high expectations that when you don't meet them, you almost feel like a failure. For example, I don't know, take something like travel, or you've booked a lovely restaurant, or you're going out for the day with your family. You expect things to be perfect, smooth journeys, relaxing experiences, good food. But in reality, flights are delayed, plans change, things go wrong. How can we cope with that? How can we cope with the differences between what we expect and reality? So let's first just think about that idea of why expectations can sometimes be a problem. Expectations are not always bad. That they motivate us, they give us direction. When we expect something to be great, we work towards it. They help us to imagine a better future. They encourage us to take action, to keep working hard. But the issue comes with the fact that expectations might be too perfect. They might be unrealistic. Or simply put, we might not meet them because of external influences that are completely out of our control. When we expect everything to go smoothly, when we have such high expectations of something, we are so much more likely to feel disappointed when things go wrong, which they will. Things go wrong, and this can make us feel like we've failed. And particularly when we're focusing on our English, it can make us feel like we're not progressing or we've done something wrong. For example, let's look at some expectations versus the reality. Okay, perhaps you can relate to some of these. These are just some that I thought of. Expectation. You start learning English, or you start really taking it seriously, and you expect that after a few months, you're speaking fluently and confidently. You join a course that says in 90 days, you're going to be fluent. That's the expectation. Well, the reality, you understand grammar. You can read well. But when someone speaks to you really fast, you're just thinking, I don't understand. That's the reality. Or you try to speak after learning so much vocabulary, idioms, expressions, and phrasal verbs. So your expectation is I'm going to be able to express myself in such an articulate way. But what happens? The reality? You forget the words. Your brain decides to stop working. They don't come out. Oh, it's just so frustrating. You've not met your expectations. But the reality is that's normal. That's okay. That's actually where progress happens. We're not always going to meet our expectations, and maybe our expectations of ourselves are too high. Now, that's an interesting thought that you really, I think you've got to balance. You've got to set yourself expectations that give yourself honor and pride. You don't want to set yourself with low expectations. That's self-deprecating, isn't it? But you don't also want to set yourself with such high expectations that you're never going to meet, because all you'll experience is failure. I know I can sometimes have a habit of that with this podcast. My expectations of how well every video and episode is going to do is always too high. I'm trying to work through that. I spend so long preparing the episodes and I think, oh, this is the one. And it's not the one. That's reality. But we're so self-destructive when we put our expectations too high, aren't we? Or perhaps let's just take some everyday examples. You join a gym. I'm going to go to the gym every day this week. That's your expectation. The reality, you go once and then you say, next Monday, I'm going to go every day next week. It's going to be a good week. It's a reality. Life gets in the way. Expectation. I'm going to start eating healthy. I'm going to cook every day. I'm going to be organized. Reality, you've got to work late. The kids are struggling a bit. Car's broken down. You order a takeaway. You eat on the sofa. Expectation, I'll study English for 1 hour every day. The reality, you do 5 minutes and then you go onto YouTube. You scroll on social media. Let's be honest, we've all been there. It happens to all of us. But we can't let it, let it make us feel like a failure. Your expectations are good, but don't beat yourself up when you don't meet them, particularly when it comes to language learning. We want to stay realistic, but positive. So does this mean that if we're going to be realistic, if we're going to stay realistic, we should just stop having expectations of ourselves? So should we think that, okay, if I listen to the GSL-English podcast every week for the next 6 months, if my English improves, that's great, but it most probably won't. Does that mean that that's the kind of expectation we should set ourselves? Low expectations? Not at all. We need realistic expectations. And we got to remain positive. So what do we mean by realistic expectations? Well, a realistic expectation accepts that things may be difficult, things are going to be challenging, and things may get in the way. For example, if you're learning English and your expectation is to speak more fluently in 6 months, part of that expectation, that realistic expectation, is that you're going to make mistakes, there's going to be challenges, and the progress might be slow. But in the same time, it's important that you stay positive. If you become too negative, you can lose motivation and stop trying altogether. So here's a balance mindset. Okay, so let's imagine that you want to improve your speaking skill in 6 months. A realistic expectation is that you are going to feel more confident speaking English. That's your expectation. But within that, you acknowledge the realistic side, that it's going to be challenging, that you will make mistakes, but you can continue to improve if you keep going. And there's the realistic, positive approach. So that's the goal. That's the expectation, that in 6 months you're going to feel more confident speaking in English. The realistic side of it is going to be challenging. There's going to be mistakes. But the positive side of it, I can improve if I just keep on going. Don't expect perfection, expect progress. That's the big takeaway from this podcast episode, I hope. Perhaps our expectation should not be perfection or an end point. Expectation should be progress. And I just feel like this is a healthy way of looking at it, because sometimes our expectations, all we think of them are as an end point, that we meet that expectation. Well, perhaps it's just gates, progress gates that we work through. So our expectations is that we will be a bit better, that we will have progressed. When reality doesn't match your expectations, it's not a failure. It's part of the process. And what's interesting, I think perhaps you've made a mistake in English that you've not made before. Well, in a way, that is still progress, isn't it? Because you're highlighting areas that you need to work on. Now you're aware of those areas. So you continue to progress. And then if your expectation is to progress, is to be better, then you meet those expectations. The only time we don't meet our expectations is when they are based around perfection, because perfection doesn't exist. If we are expecting perfection from ourselves or at a ridiculously high level, we're really setting ourselves up to fail. The truth is that life very rarely goes exactly as planned. I'm sure we're all well aware of that. But expectations based around progress can help guide us. But they shouldn't be the controlling factor of how we feel and what we do. Reality, sometimes it's just less perfect. But there's enjoyment in that. So I think sometimes, the next time things don't quite go how we expected, you can take a step back and ask yourself, well, what can I learn from this? Because sometimes the reality that happened, even when it's messy, even when it's a bit all over the place, is actually what we needed more than our expectations. Sometimes when things don't always go to plan, what we learn from that is so much more beneficial than the expectations of perfection that we set ourselves. Expectations and reality don't always meet. That doesn't always mean that we've done something wrong or that we've failed. It just means that perhaps we have to adapt, but also reevaluate what are our expectations. They have to be realistic, but also they've got to be positive. We've truly got to believe in ourselves that it's something that we can do. So what are your expectations? What expectations do you set yourself? Do you think your expectations are too high most of the time? Do you think that, when you don't meet your expectations, it makes you feel like somewhat of a failure? Perhaps you just need to change those expectations rather than an end goal, an end point, an expectation of progress. So here's a few just vocabulary expressions that we could use to talk about expectations. Now, I used this particular one at the beginning of the episode. I spoke about the holiday in Cape Verde not living up to my expectations. When we talk about something living up to the expectations, we mean, does it meet the expectations? For example, when someone really hypes up a film, I'm going to give you an example here, and this might be massively controversial. Avatar, the second one. I can't remember the name of it. Now, I like the first Avatar. The second one, everybody built up. My expectations were dramatically high for that film. This might be really controversial. Don't kill me. But for me, it didn't live up to my expectations. It wasn't what I expected from that film. It didn't meet the standards. What's not lived up to your expectations recently? Sometimes recent podcast episodes, it's not quite lived up to my expectations. It didn't meet it. Or sometimes we'll say, I had this idea in my head that blah, blah, blah. So for example, I had this idea in my head that if I listened to English every day, my vocabulary would improve. So what we're saying when we say that is that, I had this idea in my head, but the way I viewed it was perhaps a little bit out of balance. Or we sometimes say, well, in reality, the reality of the situation in real life. Or we could say, that's not how it turned out. That's not how it turned out. I thought it would be simple, learning new vocabulary, but that's not how it turned out. Or perhaps you've got a presentation to give at work. You think you're going to be fine with it. You're really confident, but that's not how it turned out. Or we might say, I was in for a shock. I was in for a shock. When I arrived, I was in for a shock. The weather was awful, particularly if you come over here to England very often. Even if it's summer, you might arrive and you're in for a shock. Actually, no, you shouldn't be in for a shock because you should expect the weather to be bad here, like we spoke about last week. The weather was awful. Just some expressions there, just to talk about when things don't quite go to plan, when expectations don't meet reality. So we could say, what have we got there? They didn't live up to my expectations. I had this idea in my head, but in reality, that's not how it turned out. I was in for a shock. Things don't always go to plan, do they? But the real danger is in setting too higher expectations of ourselves. And I think in life, setting too higher expectations of others, or what we expect from others, or what we expect from certain situations, because sometimes reality just completely changes the goalpost. So that's kind of the takeaway thought. Perhaps our expectations should be progressive rather than an end point. And if you've not met your expectations of where you wanted to be with your English by now, don't worry about it. You're still progressing. You just might not realize it. You're still doing well. You're still listening to this podcast. You're still trying with your English. It's all good. It is what it is. Life's busy. Life's crazy. Sometimes life just gets in the way. But we cannot view ourselves as a failure because we didn't meet these make-believe expectations of ourselves. But of course, within balance, we want good, solid expectations. Be proud of ourselves for what we can achieve. We keep on pushing ourselves, but within the parameters of reality. Mistakes are going to happen. It's not always going to be perfect. There you go. Just a little topic I wanted to talk about today, because I know when I was teaching English privately, this was often, I noticed there was always a point with students where they would start to feel a little bit dejected because they were improving, but their expectations of themselves were way too high. Not in a way that they couldn't achieve it, but it was physically impossible. So I always used to try and do it with the students, where we would just take a reevaluation and look at all of the things we have achieved. Did you, and there's always something to be proud of. There's always something to be proud of yourself. Sometimes there's nothing wrong with just taking a notepad out and writing down all the things that you have achieved in English. Realize where you've come from, where you are now. That's progress. Sometimes you've just got to find it. But on that note, I've had quite a few comments recently asking about private lessons. Is this something that I do? It's not at the moment. I can't see it happening in the near future. I just don't have time to offer private lessons and group lessons at the moment. I used to love doing it, but at the moment, for me, it's just not a possibility. But this is something that I would really appreciate you answering in the comments, or just giving me some more information on. My sister-in-law, so my wife's sister, is an English teacher. She teaches online. She is absolutely fantastic. She's brilliant with conversation, really helping you to talk about interesting topics and practicing expressing your opinions. She might have some availability for private students soon. If that is something you would be interested in, please let me know in the comments. And perhaps that's something we can look at starting to arrange in the next 6 months or so, or the next few months. It might not happen, but it's just an idea. We were just together, and I was talking about it with her the other day. I thought, well, maybe there's a little bit of an opportunity there. So I just want to put the feelers out there. I just want to get an idea. Is that something you would be interested in? Any of you? If it is, just say, yeah, I'd be interested in lessons with your sister-in-law, whatever. Just so I can get an idea, just gauge the interest. And if there's enough there, this is something that we'll pursue and see if we can make it possible. And maybe sometimes I will join the classes with her, just to have a chat with some of you, if it at all lines up. And that'll be great. Would love to meet some of you. I do want to do a live stream soon. Again, I think just like most of us, time at the moment is not on our side. It just seems to go by ridiculously quick. I've finished recording this on a Friday. I edit it, and then it feels like 2 minutes later I'm recording next week's episodes. I don't know where the weeks are going at the moment. I don't know where 2026 is going. Maybe I'm just getting older. Maybe that's what happens as you get older, life just goes by even faster. But yeah. So I hope you had a good week. I hope you enjoyed the episode. As always, I love all you guys. I really appreciate your support. I appreciate the way you constantly like the videos, you leave a comment, and I hope you are proud of yourself with your English. Please, for me, look back after this podcast and think about something that you are proud of. Something that, that you've achieved that you think, you know what, I'm proud of that. And if you did get to this point in the podcast, I want you to write proud in the comments. I've done that as a little test because I know some will just write expectation or reality. If you really, so you're one of the good ones and you got to this point of the podcast, write proud in the comments, but also write something you're proud of yourself for. And I promise you, I will read them all. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a good week and I'll see you next Sunday. Have a good one, guys.